All right, so let's dive into a story
Yeah.
that you might not expect. World War II. A time when,
Mm.
you know, the world was really on the brink. Now imagine if Britain,
Uh,
instead of standing against Hitler,
yeah.
forwarded, it actually sided with
Yeah.
him.
Unthinkable.
Yeah, it's hard to even fathom that.
Yeah. But that's the scenario that we're going to explore today. All because of a king who chose love over duty. A king with a very complicated relationship with Nazi Germany.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story,
Mm.
not just because of the personal drama,
Mhm.
but because of the potential impact it could have
Yeah.
had on the entire world.
Yeah.
We're talking about Edward VIII, the man who gave up the British throne to marry Wallis Simpson, an American divorcee.
Their love story has a
Yeah.
much darker side.
One that involves Nazi sympathies
Right.
and even a meeting with Hitler himself just before the war began.
And what's really incredible is we have access to declassified documents, personal accounts, and even photographs that shed light on this hidden chapter of history. And we're talking about a time when many of you were just children, but the echoes of that era still shape the world we live in today. Yeah, absolutely. It's particularly interesting how this story intertwines with themes of love, duty, power, and the consequences of personal choices on a global scale. It's a reminder that even those in positions of immense power are still human, susceptible to the same passions and failings as the rest of us.
So to understand how Edward's story could have potentially rewritten history.
Yeah.
Now, when you start at the beginning, let's rewind to his early life. Now, Edward was born into a life of privilege with 7 first names. Can you imagine the weight of those names?
Yeah.
The expectations from the moment he entered the world.
Yeah, you can almost. It's almost like he was destined for greatness. But even from a young age, his personality didn't quite fit the mold of a future king. While at Oxford, he was known more for his interest in parties and fashion than his academic pursuits.
Sounds like he was rebelling against that rigid structure of royal life, even then. But there was another side to him, a charisma and a charm that earned him the nickname Prince Charming. He was a global celebrity, adored by many. But he also had a weakness for married women, which, raised a few eyebrows, to say the least.
Right, and this sets the stage for the scandal that would rock the monarchy to its core, his relationship with Wallis Simpson. Now, divorce wasn't unheard of in the 1930s, even amongst the upper classes, but for the King of England, who was also the head of the Church of England, marrying a twice-divorced American socialite was simply unthinkable.
It was a scandal of epic proportions.
Yeah.
The British public was divided. Some romanticized their love story, seeing it as a rebellion
Yes.
against stuffy tradition. Others felt deeply betrayed by their king, questioning his judgment and his loyalty to the crown.
Yeah, and it created a constitutional crisis, remember. The monarch in Britain isn't just a figurehead. They have real power and influence, and their personal life is deeply intertwined with the political landscape. Edward was essentially forced to choose between the woman he loved and the throne he was destined to inherit.
And his choice sent shockwaves around the world. In 1936, he abdicated, giving up the throne to marry Wallis. It was a decision that changed the course of British history, leading to his younger brother, George VI, becoming king, which paved the way for the reign of Queen Elizabeth II.
It's incredible to think how one man's personal decision had such far-reaching consequences.
Absolutely. It's a perfect illustration of the butterfly effect, how seemingly small actions can have massive and unpredictable ripple effects throughout history. Edward and Wallis became the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, but they were essentially exiled, stripped of their royal titles and privileges. They craved recognition and acceptance, which, ironically, they found in the most unexpected place, and that's where we'll pick up next time. So make sure you join us for part 2 as we delve deeper into this fascinating story. We'll uncover the truth behind Edward's connections to Nazi Germany and explore the lasting impact of his choices. See you then. So we left off with the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, stripped of their royal titles, feeling rejected by their own country, and they end up finding solace, of all places, in Nazi Germany. This is where the story takes a really dark turn.
It's hard to imagine, isn't it, a former British monarch drawn to the very regime that would soon threaten the world. But remember, this was the 1930s, a time of great political and economic upheaval in Europe. The rise of fascism was seen by some as a solution to these problems, and even those who didn't necessarily agree with Nazi ideology were willing to overlook its darker aspects.
Yeah, and it seems like the Duke and Duchess, feeling ostracized by the British establishment, were particularly susceptible to this kind of thinking. They were warmly welcomed by the Nazis, who saw them as valuable assets in their propaganda war. A former king, sympathetic to their cause, is a major coup for Hitler's image.
Yeah, and it went beyond just a warm welcome. We have these infamous Windsor files, a collection of top-secret documents discovered after the war that paint a pretty disturbing picture of Edward's sympathies. These files were kept secret for years, considered too damaging to the reputation of the monarchy.
It sounds like something out of a spy novel, a conspiracy to cover up the truth. So what exactly do these files reveal? What kind of evidence do they contain?
Well, they include reports from German diplomats, intelligence assessments, intercepted communications, all suggesting Edward's pro-Nazi sentiments. Of course, we have to acknowledge the potential for bias and propaganda in wartime documents. But even taking that into account, the evidence is pretty overwhelming.
So it's not just speculation or rumors. There are actual documents that support these claims.
Yeah.
What kind of things did Edward actually say or do that would indicate his sympathies?
For instance, there's a report from the German ambassador to Spain claiming that Edward believed Britain was weak and that a Nazi victory was inevitable. He allegedly expressed admiration for Hitler's leadership, and even went so far as to suggest that a negotiated peace, one that favored Germany, would be in Britain's best interest.
Wow, that's incredibly damning. He's essentially rooting for his own country to lose the war. It's hard to believe that someone who once held the throne could hold such views.
It's certainly a jarring contrast to the image of the charismatic Prince Charming we talked about earlier. And it goes beyond passive sympathy, some historians believe. Edward may have even leaked sensitive information to the Germans, potentially jeopardizing Allied war plans.
Hold on. Are we talking about a full-blown double agent here? Was Edward actively working against his own country? That's a serious accusation.
Well, it's hard to say for certain. The evidence is circumstantial. But there are several instances where German intelligence seemed to be uncannily well-informed about Allied movements, whether this was due to Edward's direct involvement or simply a result of his loose talk and pro-Nazi leanings is still a matter of debate among historians.
This is a chilling thought. The possibility that a former king could have betrayed his country in such a way. But if these files were so damaging, why were they kept secret for so long? Why the cover-up?
Well, the British government, and even Churchill himself, argued that releasing these files would irreparably damage the reputation of the monarchy. They feared it could destabilize the country in the fragile post-war period. Remember, this was a time when people were still reeling from the horrors of the war.
And national unity was paramount.
So they prioritized protecting the institution over revealing the truth. Even if that truth involved potential treason, it seems like a dangerous precedent to set. It's a complex issue. On the one hand, transparency and accountability are crucial, especially when dealing with matters of national security. On the other hand, there's the question of protecting national interests and maintaining public trust in vital institutions. In this case, the decision to suppress the files was a calculated risk, one that ultimately delayed the full reckoning with Edward's actions.
And of course, eventually the truth did come out. The files were finally released in the late 1950s after years of pressure from historians and journalists. How did the public react when they finally learned the extent of Edward's Nazi sympathies?
It was a major scandal. The image of the king, who gave up everything for love, was irrevocably tarnished. He became a more complex and troubling figure, a man who had not only abandoned his duty, but potentially collaborated with the regime responsible for unimaginable atrocities.
It's a stark reminder that even those we place on pedestals, those who seem larger than life, are still human beings with flaws, vulnerabilities, and the capacity for making terrible choices. And sometimes those choices can have devastating consequences. So we left off with the Windsor files and the world realizing that their former king might have been a Nazi sympathizer. The war's over. The Nazis are defeated. What happens to the Duke and Duchess at this point? They can't exactly sweep this under the rug, can they?
No, they really couldn't. They found themselves in a very difficult position. Socially, they were in a sort of limbo, unable to return to Britain without facing the consequences of their actions, yet also tainted by their association with the losing side.
So they couldn't go back to the UK, with their heads held high. The rest of the world saw them as Nazi adjacent. Where did they even go? What did they do with themselves?
Well, they spent a lot of time in France, dividing their time between Paris and their country estate. They tried to maintain a lifestyle of leisure and social gatherings, but their past followed them everywhere. Every public appearance, every statement they made was analyzed and scrutinized for signs of remorse or continued Nazi sympathies.
It sounds like they were trying to live a normal life.
Yeah.
But their past just wouldn't let them. Have they ever publicly addressed their connections with the Nazi regime?
Yeah.
Do they ever express any regret for their actions?
Publicly, they remained defiant. Edward insisted that his pre-war visits to Germany were solely about promoting peace, and that he never actually endorsed Hitler's ideology. Wallace, in her memoirs, downplayed their involvement with the Nazi regime, portraying herself as an innocent bystander, caught up in her husband's political naivete.
So basically, they stuck to their story, denying any real wrongdoing. But did anyone believe them? Was the public willing to accept their explanations?
Well, public opinion was deeply divided. Some were willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, perhaps clinging to that romantic image of the king who gave up everything for love. They saw Edward and Wallace as misguided, perhaps, but not malicious. Others, however, saw right through their attempts to rewrite history, believing they had betrayed their country and could never be fully trusted.
It's fascinating how the same events can be interpreted in such different ways. It really highlights how history is often shaped by individual perspectives and narratives. But what about the royal family? Did they ever fully reconcile with Edward after all that had happened?
There were some attempts at reconciliation, but the relationship remained deeply strained. Edward's abdication had created a constitutional crisis and forced his brother, George VI, to take on a role he wasn't prepared for. The Queen Mother, in particular, never forgave Edward for what she saw as a selfish act. That put the monarchy at risk.
So even within the family, there were lasting wounds and resentment. Did Edward ever return to Britain after his abdication?
He did make occasional visits, but he was never fully embraced by the royal family or the British public. He wasn't allowed to participate in official royal events and was always treated as an outsider, a constant reminder of a scandal that the family would rather forget.
It's a rather melancholic end to a story that began with such passion and defiance. The king, who gave up his throne for love, ended up isolated and ostracized, haunted by the shadow of his past. Yet, their story continues to fascinate us, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The Duke and Duchess of Windsor remain enigmatic figures. Their motivations and the extent of their involvement with the Nazi regime are still debated by historians to this day. Their story serves as a cautionary tale about the allure of power, the complexities of love and loyalty, and the dangers of ignoring warning signs in pursuit of personal desires.
It's a reminder that history isn't just dates and battles. It's about people, choices, and consequences. Edward and Wallace's choices had far-reaching implications, not just for their own lives, but for the course of history itself.
Precisely. And it makes us consider the hypothetical. What if Edward hadn't abdicated? What if he had remained king with his pro-German leanings? How might that have impacted Britain's stance in the war? It's a chilling thought experiment that highlights how individual decisions, even those made in the name of love, can have unforeseen and potentially devastating consequences.
Yeah, it's a reminder that history is a tapestry woven from both grand events and individual choices.
Yeah, sometimes.
The threads of personal lives intersect with the threads of global events in ways that shape the very fabric of our world. The story of the Duke and Duchess of Windsor is a powerful illustration of this truth. It's a story that invites us to reflect on the complexities of human nature, the weight of our decisions, and the enduring power of history to shape our present.
We hope this deep dive has given you a new perspective on a familiar story, revealing the hidden depths and enduring significance of the Duke and Duchess of Windsor's controversial life choices.
Thanks for joining us on this journey to the past. Remember, history isn't just something we read about in textbooks. It's a living narrative that continues to shape our world today. So keep questioning, keep exploring, and we'll see you on our next deep dive.